Mikey, here we are again. Third and final one of this little mini series, I guess we're doing.
Mm.
Finding purpose. I love it. Love it when we do a podcast and it just evolves into like multiple podcasts. So really good. So our first one, we talked about what is purpose, and we kind of looked at different principles around that. Our last one, I interviewed you a little bit about your journey and purpose, and so I guess this is your time now to do payback. And I'll tell you my little story and my journey. So where do you want to begin? Where do you want to begin?
Well, I am actually a little bit intrigued, and I know what we do on this, like when we're talking to each other, we put each other on the spot. So let me
Oh dear.
quickly put you on the spot. It was actually quite enjoyable sharing my story with you, and thanks for being the listening ear and the person who's asking the questions. There's something quite powerful about reliving your story. In actual fact, there's a great little quote which says, "Relive to relieve," and
Right.
the whole
I like
the
that.
power of disclosure. But it was 2, 3 days ago when we did that. Was there anything from my story, Davey, that stuck out for you that was like fascinating, interesting? I'll just have to quickly get one thought from you in terms of that.
Well, what I did find interesting, and I do when I'm listening to people's stories, is actually the if you look backwards, you can see the roots of what you were passionate in making change, being the person to put the hand up to make a speak.
Mm,
To right from the beginning, you were this person who wants to put their voice in the room, wants to create that sense of discussion, from your earliest memories that you were
mm,
talking about, and just to see how that developed as you went on. So that was certainly one thing that stuck out for me. And I think often by tracing back our childhood and understanding how we were when we were kids, often sheds a really good light on that's where the seeds of purpose usually, because it's without filters, isn't it? We kind of don't have those filters back then, and that's, I think, is a great place to look back. So I was very interested to hear that in your story. And I think the other thing is that even though you got the catalyst, you saw that person do that talk, facilitation guy, and he really, it was the lights came on for you. You still took 2.5 years to actually end up in that spot, and I thought that was quite interesting because a lot of
yeah,
people would have given up the next day, and you didn't. You said no, let's journey that. So I found that quite
understood.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. I just thought it would be interesting to see what were the things that really stood out. Okay, so I'm looking forward to this because one, I know you've got a very, very interesting story, and similar to mine, I know it's taken you in different directions. It hasn't been just one profession that you've done. So I suppose, seeing you took us to childhood, Davy, what role or how did purpose manifest itself for you in your informative years?
So I was born in Zambia. My parents are missionaries. So right from the get go, I'm in this mud hut on this mission field. My parents were absolutely soaked and absorbed in mission and purpose. It consumed their life. They were missionaries. I don't think it gets much more missionary like that. And I'm born on a mission field, so I guess I didn't have much choice really. And so my first 3 years were spent there, and then because of the political instability, we came back to the UK, where I grew up in Devon. But my parents were missionaries right until the day they died, even though. So my dad ran a children's ministry. My mum was very, very. She was a district nurse, but she saw that as a mission field.
Mm,
And so I kind of grew up in a very missionary kind of family. So from an early age, I've always had this sense of purpose, this sense of my life has a meaning and a purpose, and you don't just kind of sail your way through life.
mm,
And in some respects, it's double-edged sword because one, you're always asking, is this my purpose? Am I doing the right thing? And so you never kind of just giving yourself some time to explore. You feel like you have to know your purpose. So yeah, so I grew up in a very purpose-led family. Yeah, I've always been involved in doing things. Led a band, from an early age, and did social things. Helped my dad, who ran a big football team for kids on the housing estate. I mean, those days, I literally had a minibus where you just pick kids up off the street, go play football with them. You wouldn't get away with that these days. So, yeah. So that was, I guess, that's the context of my life. Born into mission.
Yeah. So it sounds like if you, or let me ask you this question: Do you believe this then, that the environment in which we're born into can actually play quite a significant role in how we go about chasing things or not chasing things in our later lives?
That's a big question. We should do another whole podcast series on that. Nurture or nature, I guess, is the other way of saying that. Yeah, absolutely. I think the DNA that you're born in, that those formative years, they do shape you. And there was no room in my life, in my childhood life and my certain teenage life, to just kind of explore and just kind of float. There was no room for that. It was a very, very determined, structured, kind of view on life. This is, you're there to make a difference and change the world around you. Of course, it was framed very much by a religious view, but it was still one of, don't be lazy. You have a purpose and a mission. You must do that. So, a real sense of that. Yeah, I guess looking back, I would have liked a little bit more time to think about things, maybe. But in some respects, I do think the die was set right in the early years, and so that set pretty much, my life. In as much as you were describing, it set yours as well.
So if you were to take yourself back to around about age 15, 16, and people asked you, like they always do at that age, what you're going to do when you leave school, did you have a clear sort of vision picture of what this was?
Yeah, absolutely. From the age of 12, I wanted to be a pastor. I wanted to start a new kind of church that was exciting, that was attractive to people. I wanted to present a new face of Christianity, and I was itching to get at it. So, right from an early age, I always wanted to be a pastor of a church, and start these churches. And I wanted it to be this fun, exuberant. I had a real picture of what it should be. And then at the age of 16, my parents said, okay, but you need to go and get a trade. And because you can't expect people to pay for you to do that, you need to go out and have a job that you can go and earn money, and then you do that in your part-time, in your spare time, kind of thing. And so at 16, my parents bullied me to sign up to become an electrical engineer, do electrical engineering at Polytechnic. So off I went for 3 years, and did an HND in electrical engineering. So, because for them, it was always about, you've got to have something to lean back on, that you never become a burden to people. So your calling was not your provision. Your calling was your calling, and you found something else to provide for you. That's kind of how it was spelled out to me. So, yeah, 3 years and did electrical engineering, HND, and then went to work. Again, my parents, a strong voice, said, now you go to work and learn life's lessons. So off I went to a factory for 5 years and worked in a factory. Yeah. But I still carried this huge desire to ultimately, I was going to become a full-time pastor and plant a church. And of course, that's what I did.
So we'll get there, but I love that line, your calling is not your provision. Is that advice you would give to your children? Did you give that advice to your children? Is it something that you agree with now, or how do you feel about it? Yeah.
You see, that's a challenging one, because there is an essence to that I think is true. I think sometimes your calling it's the things that we said, it's the things that bring desire and delight and life and energy. But sometimes those things don't necessarily provide you with income. So, there may well be times when you need to do something over here that creates an income, allowing you to pursue those things and then slowly you find a way to make what you're passionate about also provide that income. I'm a big believer that finance follows vision. Money always follows vision. I've always believed that. I've seen that in my life. If you set the vision and you are clear about your vision, and you're willing to pay a price for your vision, and you of course, are a great example of this. When you step into your vision, finance, in my view, has always followed vision. So I've always said, don't worry about the money, worry about clarity of the vision first. And then be willing to pay a price for a season, you know. And in many times of my life, when I've moved and done different things, I've had to lean back on my trade, which I'm really grateful for. So there's been many times I've gone back and been an electrician or electrical engineer or whatever it is, whilst starting to build up this other thing that I'm doing. And you know, 3 or 4 times that's happened, right?
So it's quite interesting. There's a similarity to my story here, where, as I mentioned, I obediently did the degree for my father.
Exactly. Yes.
And at the time, it was dutiful. I didn't have a really a huge negative attitude for it. It wasn't my choice, but I was a respectful, honorable son. Did it, and then a couple of years later, it came in hugely handy. And
yes.
And
Exactly right.
I know your story a little bit further down the line as to how handy this electrical engineering competence turns out to be. So yeah, it is quite interesting, those sort of similarities. Yeah, you know, I once heard Liz Gilbert say, and I might sort of butcher this a little bit because it's going back quite a few years. But Liz Gilbert is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, and she spoke about how she desperately wanted to keep her passion from being the source of her income. Because when the passion becomes the source of the income, it also then has the potential to lose its impact, because now it's transactional.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting listening to her do that. Now, I suppose you could argue it in a sense that you know, my passion is definitely my source of income. I don't know where I'd find time to maybe have other ways to be spending time to get income. But it is this interesting thought that your folks seem to almost be down that similar line, which says you've got this passion, but don't necessarily make it the source of your sustainability.
Yeah, and I get it, you know, and that's why I said again. I keep saying a truth must be a truth in tension, you know. I think there are seasons when your passion and your income are 2 different things. You know, what you're doing for passion, what you're doing for income may well be 2 different things. And I think you can do that for a season. I really do. You know, I'm not sure you can do that forever.
Yes, I agree with you.
I think there are, you know, there has to become at some point a marrying up of your passion and your income. As I said, finance follows vision. Ultimately, finance follows vision, and there might be a gap between pursuing what you're passionate about doing and having to do a gig in the background to pay for that, you know. But ultimately, I believe if you're true to your vision and you follow it and you do it well, you know, the finance and etc. flows with it. So, but you know, there are definitely seasons in both our lives where the finances followed our vision, and then other times we had to go out somewhere else to find finance in order to push our vision forward, you know. So I think again it's that truth intention, you know, and knowing what season you're in, you know, where are you? Because I've seen so many people step out into their calling and then completely fall apart because they expected money just to pour in, and that doesn't usually happen. You know? There's a lag usually.
Seth Godin's got a great line where he says, flexibility in the face of change is where resilience comes from. And it's a little bit of a tension. You know, often we say burn the ships. And I think there are times to burn the ships because failure is not an option. But then there are other times as well where this is my passion, this is my sense of purpose. But there are plan A, B's, and C's, which I might need to turn to every now and again.
Exactly.
Because resilience is going to come from having the ability to be a little bit flexible. So again, that's a little bit. Now, take me back to the 5 years or however many years you were in a factory. In those years, were you doing something to make the church dream become a reality?
Yeah, so I worked as an engineer, worked shifts, and then any moment of my life outside of that, I was working for this local church, and I was involved in their music department and their outreach department, and so I that was the delight and the fun part, and I guess that's where, in both cases, working in a factory, I'm learning about life. I'm learning, lessons of life, an apprentice, as it were, in that respect. And then also in the church thing, learning about people and mission. And so I don't look back as being difficult times. I think they were both really formative for shaping, And I would certainly say to people, there's nothing wrong with while you're forming and shaping your vision, to hold down a job, a secular job, as it were, as well, because I think both are formative. There's grit involved, having to get up at 6 a.m., work 6 till 2, and then go and then do your passion from 2 until 6 in the evening, that kind of thing, So yeah, and I think that sets you up for later on in life when you do marry the two together, definitely. Yeah. So I look back at those years. I loved them. They were good years. Yeah, without a doubt.
Adam Grant, in one of his books, talks about keep your day job while the vision is unfolding. And, he gives a couple of examples. Stephen King worked as a janitor and a petrol attendant while starting to write his first few books. Wozniak from Apple stayed at HP until an angel investor came in. Brian May, Queen, continued his studies even after they'd had one or two big hits. So,
exactly. Work, and I would actually encourage people to do it that way around. I really would. And you work part time, or you work until this is going to take the full time. And I think people do this. They think it's faith, or it's being really entrepreneurial, just to throw themselves into this area where there's no finance. I don't necessarily think that's wisdom, and I see more failures that way. Than people going. And that's what I liked about your story, is you got the inspiration, you could see what you wanted to do, but you still had 2.5 years where you worked it out before you made the leap. And retrospectively, I think that's a much wiser way of doing it.
Yes.
And I don't think it's any less faith-filled either, by the way, or any less entrepreneurial. I just think it's wiser, basically. So And to understand the season, if you are listening to this podcast and you're working a part-time job you're not really passionate about, but you're doing it because you can see the end in mind, which is the most important thing in life. You've got clarity on the end in mind, you can pay the price short-term.
Okay, so after the factory years, is that starting your own church, or is it joining an already established church? How did that work, and how did purpose play itself out there?
Yeah, so long story short there, got involved, actually went to South Africa, my wife being South African, went to South Africa for 18 months, and they had this whole program of starting new churches around the world. So I put my hand up and ended up going back to the UK and started 14 years of what we would call church planting in those days. Literally turned up to a town with 5 or 10 people that I've managed to get to agree to help me, and start this work, and with this passion or this idea to start a church that was looking a little bit different to what it was before, relevant and fun, and had coffee at the beginning rather than the end, all these crazy ideas. So I started a church in a town called Crawley. Grew it to several hundred strong, which was quite a big church in the day at the time. And I was 25 and started, had this church going and multiple staff, and ended up planting or starting 3 new churches in those 14 years in different towns in the UK. And thoroughly enjoyed it, and felt really, really fulfilled in it. But also, towards the end was a period of some really soul-searching, big questions being asked. As you grow older in life, you question a lot of the things that you were taught as a child, right? And so there was definitely my life was coming up to a transition point. at the end of that 14 years where I felt like I needed to do something different. There needed to be a change. In my own thinking, in what I was doing, and so we decided to hang our boots up in church planting, and then we moved back to South Africa, where my wife was from, with my young kids who were there in their early teenage years, and decided to. Yeah, we were quite burnt out. We were tired, and it seemed like a right point for transition. So, on the deal, my wife. We're going to go back and you're not allowed to start anything. You must go and get a 9-to-5 job, a proper job. So that was the agreement. And so we arrived back in South Africa in 2009. Yeah. So that was that season. Really good season. Loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. And, because of my experience as well, definitely nowhere near as long as yours, but, my 3 years, close to 3 years in that sort of full-time ministry space. As I said, I think about maybe the first podcast or whatever. The stage is a place of recognition. So many needs are met. You're also entrepreneurial there. You're the guy in charge. You getting people to come along with your purpose, if you think of it. And then you come to South Africa. Did you find that a bit of a purpose? What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, not really a purpose hangover, but suddenly, how do you get purpose again when you've been in a place where it is purpose driven and you're eliciting people to your purpose?
Yeah. So I would definitely say the next 2 years was a wilderness year. So it was a wilderness because you gain your identity comes a lot from what you do, and you can't help it. Anyone can help it, but it's not necessarily a healthy place. When your identity is fixed in what you do, you very seldom change what you do, because the pain of changing what you do is essentially you're challenging your own identity, right? And for 14 years, my identity was in this particular work I was doing. I mean, I was also running during that time a number of other companies, an electrical company and a coaching company called Cornerstone. So I had 3 or 4 other companies going in parallel with the church thing. And then arrived in South Africa in 2009, and I'm working 9 to 5 for an electrical company. And so I've gone from, this big thing and all of that to this real wilderness. Yes, questioning, who am I? What is my identity? And I love this thing. Life is a series of death and resurrections. Life is a series of death and resurrections. There's a thing of, an apple needs to fall from a tree and die in the ground. But within that is the seed of new life. And I can see many times where I've had to go through death situations, dying to the last 14 years of whatever that was. And then allowing time for something new to start to rejuvenate and come into something completely new, which, of course, as you know, turned out to be this whole new business idea, which I never saw coming. But I think often my word would be, if you feel like there's a change coming, embrace the fact that there's likely to be a death period, a dying to something. And there's a period of time where something needs to go in the ground. And the temptation is to keep digging up to see if there's something there. You have to trust the process. And so for 12 to 18 months, I worked as a regular electrical guy in an electrical company, while something was percolating underneath, I would say.
Would you say you had purpose during those 18 months, or would that be potentially a more purposeless time of your life?
It was purposeless for me in terms of what I was doing, because what I was doing was just putting food on the table. When others would say that's a great purpose, but for me it didn't feel like that. But my attention was very much focused on my family, and turning this period of time was about the family. So I think that's another good thing about finding purpose is there are purposes for certain periods of time, and again, I think you can identify different periods of your life where there was a specific purpose for that period of time. And then it comes to an end, and then a new purpose rises, and then you do that, right? This sense of, I guess you could look back over your entire life and see how they all join up ultimately, but you can't see that when you're in it.
Mm.
So you say, for this time, this is my purpose. And I think that's healthy to say that. For this period of time, this is what I'm doing. This is my purpose for now. And so, yeah, that's, I guess, how I would frame it.
And I think that's a very interesting insight, because sometimes we're changing the world, and sometimes it's our own renewal, it's our own
Right.
time
It's
out.
our own world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And it reminds me of something James Clear says, his brilliant book Atomic Habits. But he says keep your identity small, because the more you cling to a single belief about yourself, the harder it is to change when life changes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you had clung to the belief of being on the stage,
Yeah.
even though that purpose actually still remains, because you find your way back there,
Yes.
but through a couple of other details. Okay, Dave, talk to us then about the last 10 years, because I know the story well, but it's I've often said to you, we need to write a book about this chapter of your life, because it's worthy of a book. And so maybe, I know we don't have much time, but just a couple of big pointers from it, and specifically thinking about purpose in this hugely successful chapter of your life.
Yeah, and it's very true that, you know, sometimes we don't find purpose finds us. So I done my 18 months working for this company, and whilst I'm working for this company, I see an opportunity in the market. Power and electricity is increasingly getting expensive, and people need to become better at conserving it. And there was a particular product I was selling for this electrical company that would allow companies to save on electricity. But for them to buy this product, it was particularly expensive, and so a lot of companies didn't do it. So I'm sitting in a reception area, and this photocopier guy comes along, and I'm listening to him do his sales speech, and he says, you know, everyone wants a photocopier. They can't afford to buy one. So what we'll do is we'll put a photocopier in your office, and you just pay for every copy you make. And suddenly a light bulb went on. This particular product was really expensive. What if I bought the product and I put it in the factory, and I took 50% of any of the savings that it made? You know, and I kind of put it on the back of a fag packet, as it were, as to work out the calculations. I thought, this is a really good idea. And I'm thinking, how in the hell am I going to do this? Because you need a serious amount of cash to start it. I happened to go to a meeting, and I get tapped on the shoulder by a guy who I'd met 14 years before, earlier. We're like, well, you know, how you doing? And you doing? Anyway, we had this conversation, and I said to him, you know, this crazy idea that I think could really, you know, change things. But I need investors. And he says, well, I just happen to be with 3 investors that are looking for someone with a crazy idea. How crazy is that? And he sets us up a meeting, and within 2 weeks, I'm pitching in front of these people this idea, and they buy into it. They say, okay, let's do the first one and see how it goes. And essentially what we did is we provided a unit that went on to big fans and pumps, and it created energy efficiency. And we just did a deal where we did about 50% of the energy being saved came as a fee to us, and the company kept the other half. And so was born this idea called Energy Drive, where we literally started like that. And over the last 10, well, I sold out after 12 years, and the company was valued at over R1 billion. And is now in 6 continents of the world and growing, you know, and it's an amazing story, really. So, you know, what has that got to do with with my previous story? I guess for me, what was the motivator for this was that I could see that after 10 years I could exit, and it would provide for me a financial platform to be able to go and help people and work with people, and actually now do what I'm doing now, which is mentoring and coaching, and working with other companies. So yeah, that was my story of Energy Drive, company that is still going and going from strength to strength now.
Yeah. And what I really get from it is that sometimes we can limit purpose to a vehicle, but we need to be careful that we don't do that. So if you limit it to it, you need to be involved in a church to impact people. No, the purpose is impacting people. The church could be one vehicle. There could be so many other vehicles as well. And don't limit yourself by the vehicle. Find that there's some purpose, and then just be open to where this can go.
I love that. You know, your eyes have to be fixed on the destination, not the vehicle to get to the destination. A car is good when you've got roads, but what about when you have mountains? Now you need another type of vehicle. And I do believe that what was passionate for me in Energy Drive was still people. You know, what's been common through all of this is that I love working with people and inspiring people and helping people and helping people find solutions. And I guess right through my whole life, that has really been the purpose. My life is to help others find clarity, find purpose, and find solutions to their problems. And there's just been different vehicles along the way, church and coaching companies and engineering companies and what have you. And I think that's the joy, isn't it? Not to fixate on the vehicle, but understand what the journey is you're on, understanding that journey and having the flexibility to change the vehicle as is needed as it goes along. And sometimes, stepping out the vehicle and allowing the vehicle to be completely deconstructed and then turned into something else was something that we need to do, right?
Yeah. It's it's like they sometimes say in corporates or big companies or any company, sometimes you need to bet the business, you need to disrupt it. And if I think of your career, there's been these disruptions. But I know we're out of time, but just that beautiful thing, sometimes if you feel you've got no purpose or you're not too sure what it is about, just listen to what's going on around you. And here you are, you're sitting in an office and you're listening to a photocopier guy say something, and bingo, here it goes. So I suppose the encouragement to all of us is when you find yourself in a purposeless place, still show up, lean in, listen to what's going on. Is it possible that the universe is God, however you want to frame it, there's a message coming through here. Just don't go the other route of resign compliance, which would be, well, that was my dream for my life. It's not happening anymore. I'm just going to put food on the table. Like you say, not that we minimize that, because that is also a great purpose that we do or seek to try and do. Okay, Davey, it's been absolutely amazing. And like I said, I'm privileged to know the story, but even just listening to you again, it's just very inspiring. If you had to give one last final nugget then, as you've relived your story a little bit on this topic of purpose, is there a final little voice going off there saying, "Hey, I need to quickly share this"?
Well, only to add more volume to what you've just said. That we mustn't fall in love with the vehicle. We must love the journey and the destination, not the vehicle. And don't let your identity be fixed into what you are currently doing. There's a difference between who you are, your being, and your doing. And our purpose is about your being. Doing is just an outworking of that purpose. And that outworking can change and be in different forms. And that's the thing I think I'm loving about life, is that I'm a coach and a mentor now. I'll be a coach and a mentor all my life, but I may not be coaching and mentoring quite the way I am right now in 5 years' time. And find the essence of that purpose, and then let the journey unfold. Be curious, be open-minded. I think that was.
Last thought from my side would be focus on the verb, not the noun. So pastor, noun; entrepreneur, noun; verb, changing people's lives, sharing ideas, supporting people to get their businesses going. More the verb, the doing, because the doing can find itself into many different places.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, yeah,
You know, one last thing I'd love to say about you, Davey, is that you are 98% up, 98% positive, and 2% down. And most people will never see that. I've seen parts of those 2%.
yeah.
But maybe one last question then. Do you think this extreme positivity of yours, this guy who's generally always got a smile, has that played a huge role in how this whole thing has unfolded?
Uh, yes, positivity is a blessing. It's never a curse. It's a blessing. I'm blessed to have it. And yeah, it is a life force. It does drive you. I see things half full rather than half empty. I think if there's a downside to positivity, sometimes we don't lean into the changes that we need to make. We kind of just quick to wash over it. It'll be fine. And that's again where a discipling authentic relationship like you and I have had, the last 15 years, where I can pick up the phone, exactly what mood I'm in by the way I say hello to you, vice versa. And then there's that challenge. Okay, tell me what's really happening. You don't have to be that positive person right now. And I would say in this journey of finding purpose, find someone to do the journey with you. Because we see with blinkers, even the best, we don't see out here, and we need someone to journey that journey with me. And I'm very grateful to have you in my life, to be that journey person with. Absolutely.
Thanks, Davey. Beautiful, wonderful story. And yeah, I'm sure it's going to inspire everybody who listens to it.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. It's been great. Great three-part series, and hope it makes a difference to people's lives. We'll chat soon. Speak soon. Take care.
Cheers.